Okay, welcome back. We're on page 606 talking about site preparation. And I will caution you, I've been in a scenario where they delivered a piece of equipment to the loading dock and it wouldn't fit through the door. And we contemplated actually knocking a wall out, and then the vendor came back and said, well, I could disassemble it and put it through the door and then reassemble it in the room, but it's going to cost you. And that's ended up what they were doing. So yes, site prep, it's kind of sort of important. So the next thing, of course, is this data preparation phase. And I kind of sort of talked to you about, this is a phase that's not in the book. But, okay, I need to convert my old data to my new data. And so when it comes time for me to actually doing my implementation, if I had pulled some old data to play with, now I need to pull live data. So I really have to have, most likely, I have to have a way to say, okay, at this midnight on some day, boom, we're going to freeze that database, pull the data and convert it, and then move on to the new database. So you'll have the old one up to this point and then the new one from that point over. You have to have some sort of a cutover system, which we'll talk about in just a few seconds. But this data preparation phase is very, very important, and I'm kind of annoyed that the book doesn't have it. So it's a very time-consuming step. It's a very important step, and yes, I'm again kind of annoyed it's not in the book. Okay. So now we have to physically install the stuff. I will caution you that if you already have a server room put together, you kind of sort of need a keeper. You really need to have somebody there in the room. And I mean for everything. When the electrician comes up to says, well, I need to install some new, 240 outlets here. You say, okay, but you can't kill this breaker over here because this is mission critical server going on. You need to be talking to these people. You don't just turn them loose in your server room, because they may say, well, let's kill the power to the room. All your systems go down hard with errors, right? Okay, I've seen this happen. So when the guys come to install, where do you want the rack? Well, I'd like it over there in that corner. You have to be a traffic cop there. I would recommend, if you could, basically have someone in the server room the entire time that someone is there. I'm just telling you. Okay. Let's continue. So the hardware vendor is going to be doing some sort of operational testing, and this is not a category of testing like we have to add. We're not talking about unit testing, integration testing, system testing. So we're talking about just physically plugging in and firing up, make sure all the parts work. Okay, the stuff that the vendor would do normally. So the vendor comes in, installs his hardware, he fires it up, and goes, yep, looks like it's all working. So that's just kind of operational testing. It's not another category. It's just something they would do normally before they moved on to the next step. Okay, here's an extraordinarily important part. How do I switch over from the old system to the new system? And there are lots of options. Okay. So, the most disruptive is what's called direct conversion. I like it called the plunge. What that basically means is you go to work, you leave work on Friday and you finish entering some data in the middle of the system. You come to work on Monday and it's an entire new system from scratch. Now that's kind of jolting, and probably is going to be lots of chaos. I know people, now this is true story, guys. I know people that the day of the cutoff, they would call in sick because they just didn't want to hassle with it. Like, let everyone else figure it all out. I'll come in the next day and I'll learn from their lessons on how to do this. But I just don't want to go through the chaos of having to learn everything over from scratch. In the Army, I recall a scenario where they were going to install this new system for, doesn't matter what, for product X. They came in and did user training, and then they delayed the implementation and delayed. By the time they installed the system, it had been like 11 months since they had user training. Okay, so they installed the new system, did a conversion over, and no one remembered a thing from 11 months ago when they actually went to training. So yes, direct conversion is a pretty much guaranteed for lots of chaos, lots of failure, and lots of loss of productivity. If you don't care about productivity, Fine. Use direct conversion. Most people would never, ever do direct conversion, where you just pop over from one system to the new system and poof, you're done. We're going to come back to this diagram here in just a minute. The next one over, which makes a little bit more sense, is called phase in. In phase in, if you have a system that you're swapping out, you could maybe do it in chunks. You could say, well, let's move over to the new hardware, and then later we'll come back and we'll move over to the new database. And then maybe next time we'll come over and we'll break it up in pieces. Now there's an awful lot of systems where that's just not going to work. There's just no way you can piecemeal it. But it is a valid approach, and the idea is instead of making all the changes all at once, you make a little change here and a little change here and a little, and when you're done, you end up making all of the changes. Okay, now again, that's not applicable to every single product, because sometimes there's just no way. It's the whole thing or nothing, and this could take forever. I mean, you could take months to go through each one of these little phases. So an alternative to this is what's called the pilot program. It's kind of sort of the same concept. Instead of physical pieces of the system being swapped out, you take pieces of your organization and pop it out. So you have 5 manufacturing facilities. You pick the smallest one, okay? And you implement the new system there. Let them be the pilot. They try the new system. Everyone else is still using the old, except for this one guy. And this one guy, this one organization is doing all that. Now, this is some good stuff. Yes, it'll be disruptive. And yes, they'll hate it. And yes, it'll be a lot of lessons learned. But once they've been through it once, they can come say, okay, now we had this problem, and here's how we solved it. And so when it comes time to do the other 4 manufacturing plants, woohoo, you're home free. So this is an excellent approach. It doesn't take quite as long. Well, it could. You could do them one at a time. What most people do is they do a pilot, and then once the pilot is successful and they've got some tweaks to the system, or most likely tweaks to the user documentation, then they do all the rest of them all at once. Okay, so this could take a month or 2. So pilot is kind of sort of similar to this, except this is physical pieces and these are organizations. And then parallel. Parallel means, look, this is such an important system that there's no way I could just switch over. I need some sort of an overlap. I need to have the old system and the new system running simultaneously to verify that everything is cool. If I was a bank, I would probably want to do the parallel system. Okay, I'd want to have my old system running and the new system running simultaneously so I can compare the two and say, yep, they're producing the exact same things. Now, this is good. It provides you the most secure way to switch over from an old system to a new system. However, that also means I need to, every time somebody comes up to the bank teller and wants to withdraw money, I have to enter it into the old system and then turn around and enter it into the new system. So that's double work, okay? Now, a lot of people are not going to like that. So most of the time when you do this, you do it for a short period of time. Let me go back to the diagram. So this is the guaranteed chaos. You'll come to work the next day and press a change over. Everything is new. This could be either the phase in or the pilot, depending on what you're looking at. So something or someone does it first, and then the next one does it, and the next one does it. This is the parallel, where there's some sort of an overlap between the two. Now, which you choose, of course, is highly dependent on what it is you're doing for a living and how important the system is. So choose wisely is the whole point. Okay, so that is all about that. Now we're into phase 7 of the 6 phases. Hey, I told you this author can't count. So this is about system operation and maintenance. I'm going to say and system operation, maintenance, and disposals. It's actually 3 things here. But anyway, who cares? They can't count to 7 and they can't count to 3. Whatever, right? All right. So first thing is you have to operate the new system. That kind of makes sense, right? So several things you need to worry about is staffing. I need to have the right staff to operate the new system. And we could be talking about technical staff, server operators, database administrators. That would be one. But we could be just talking about, the order entry clerks. Perhaps I have a system and I expect this new system is going to generate twice the amount of sales, I'm going to have to hire more people to do order entry. Okay, so some sort of people operation. I need to hire more people. I'm probably going to have to set up a help desk. Now, I might set it up in-house. I may hire the company to set it up for me. I may have a third party to do it. But if I have a big organization, somebody's going to have the responsibility of answering the question. So a user calls up and says, we just got this new system yesterday, and tell me one more time, how do I produce an invoice? It gives them step-by-step instructions. Somebody has to do that. Monitoring, again, if you had a requirement, and particularly if it was a numeric requirement. Let's say you had a requirement that said it had to produce this many transactions per second, or you had a requirement that said that the response time had to be within so many seconds. I hit the button and I expect the screen to refresh in less than 1 second. Well, you need to have some monitoring to make sure your system is still performing at the levels that it was guaranteed to perform. So this monitoring step. There's all sorts of tools you can use to do this, and I'm not going to go into that kind of detail. But it's all about monitoring. And then they talk about the review, the system review. So this is basically, this could be at the end of a year, it could be at the end of the month, 1 month after use. Somebody should probably go through and say, is everything working the way we expected it to work? And particularly if this was like a pilot. So at the end of the pilot, you would produce a system review and say, here's all the things, here's all the gotchas, here's all the problems we had, here's all the fixes, here's how we need to change the user documentation to make it more clear. A whole list of things that gets produced in this thing. So this is sort of like an audit of the system saying, yes. Now, remember requirements, okay? So this, one thing to do is check to see if it met the requirements. But what I'm really interested in is, did it meet my business goals? The requirement was to do this, this, and this, but that's not really what we're after. I'm after, did it produce increased sales, for example? So the system review might take a little bit longer. The system review might say, the system we built is perfect. However, it made no changes in sales. Okay? That may not be a reflection of the hardware and software and installation and the vendor you chose to build the system. It could be a completely other reason. So this review is both on the system that you built and its benefits that it was supposed to build for you. Because, everything is aligned to some sort of business goal. You don't just go put in a new system for fun. It has to have some sort of a valid business need. Okay. The next step is maintenance. Now, maintenance is not the use of the word maintenance here is not the traditional use of fixing things, okay? What they really mean now is changes. So I have a system in place and somebody says, that's great, but wouldn't it be kind of cool if it did this? So we're talking about change requests. So yes, you could have a scenario where I'm looking at, okay, the performance is not as great as I need to go in and make a tweak. In the meantime, there's a new business process that popped up, where I can save an awful lot of money. So dang it, I have to go in and tweak my system again to add this new business process. What about the changes in the needs? They come and say, we just don't need that anymore, but instead we need this. Things change, right? There's no way you can come up with all the requirements. Bugs, hardware problems, corporate mergers and acquisitions. I've often used that one as an example. Yeah, because this drives IT people absolutely crazy because they can never anticipate at all what the requirements are. In fact, they're probably the IT people are probably the last to know that, oh, by the way, we're going to get bought out or we're buying a competitor. And they go, wow! They don't know anything at all about it. Okay, this is probably a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark, and we'll continue this in just a few.